Okay, how are we doing, everybody? We doing all right? We're good? Good. Well, if you're new or you're visiting, my name is Matt. I get the joy of being the priest in this beautiful community called Unlimited, and we are a family here at Unlimited. People often say, like, who's your team? Like, how does it work? And I say, well, we're a family. We're a family on a mission to do two things. Firstly, we want to be a multi-generational church that is like going all out to see those people who would never normally come into contact with church or faith or Jesus come into contact and have conversations that really matter, that are full of life, and be kind of like, I guess, have a perception changed. And secondly, we want to be the miracle people in the middle of the city who see miracle after miracle after miracle. We believe God works, and He's at work today, and that we're going to see miracle after miracle after miracle. And the miracle that I'm praying for is Levi courage. Please leave those balls alone. Thank you so much. That's the miracle that I'm praying for right now. And so, welcome to being a pastor's kid, everybody. And so, we get the joy of, Laura, I get the joy of leading our beautiful team. And we're going to dive in today. We are looking, as a church, across the year at this beautiful book called Mark. It is an eyewitness account of Jesus. It's written by one of Jesus' friends. And we're going to dive into this week. This week, we've got Henry reading for us. So can we give it up for Henry, everybody? Turn with me to page number 12. We should have a few loaner copies here. If you are not a Christian or you're new to faith, this book is for you. Take this home and this book is for you. If you are a regular here and you've got a loaner copy, please give it back at the end. We love you.
Thank you. Another time Jesus went into the synagogue. A man with a weak and twisted hand was there. Some of the Pharisees were trying to find fault with Jesus. They watched him closely. They wanted to see if he would heal the man on the Sabbath day. Jesus spoke to the man with the weak and twisted hand. "Stand up in front of everyone," he said. Then Jesus asked them, "What does the law say we should do on the Sabbath day? Should we do good or should we do evil? Should we save a life or should we kill?" But no one answered. Jesus looked around at them in anger. He was very upset because their hearts were stubborn. Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand became as good as new. Then the Pharisees went out and began to make plans with the Herodotians, however you pronounce that. They wanted to kill Jesus. Jesus went off to the Sea of Galilee with his disciples. A large crowd from Galilee followed. People heard about all that Jesus was doing, and many came to him. They came from Judea, Jerusalem? No, that's not. Yeah. Jerusalem and Idumea. They came from the lands east of the river Jordan, and they came from the area around the Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, Jesus told his disciples to get a small boat ready for him. This would keep the people from crowding him. Jesus had healed many people, so those who were ill were pushing forward to touch him. When people controlled by evil spirits saw him, they fell down in front of him. Their spirits shouted, "You are the Son of God," but Jesus ordered them not to tell people about him.
Hey, can we thank Henry? Can we thank Henry, everybody? Okay, right. I want you to spend 1 minute with the person next to you saying one thing that surprised you, one thing you want to dive into, one thing you hadn't noticed before. If this is new to you, one thing that you find interesting, can we have one comment from just like the person next to you? Okay, come on back in. Okay, I want to dive into this a little bit. I've got a few things I want to dive into. The first thing is that they are watching Jesus. I find it fascinating. Yeah, what do we find in the first thing? In this little first bit of the paragraph, they watched him closely. I don't know about you, but when people stare at me, I find it awkward. Have you been in a situation of late where people are just intently looking at you? I remember a time. If you're new here, I've got ADHD, and it's apparent to everybody. I'm aware of that. And there are times that I accidentally say things that I'm aware may not always come out in the way that I wanted to come out. Have you been in this situation? I was with someone the other day, and a neighbour of mine, and she said, "What do you think about this?" And I just was like, Laura told me I was out of order, and then this woman just looked at me, stared at me, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I see this is awkward. And then we had this conversation. And I tried to when you're in that situation, you try and dig yourself out the hole and it gets worse. And Laura was there like, can you just shut up? And you get that look and you know you're in trouble. Jesus is in a space where he knows that he's in trouble. He is being stared at. As people who follow Jesus, we will be in the same boat. We will be in the same boat. One of the commentators said this: the condemnation of the Pharisees is that they utterly failed to see this man's case of need. All they saw was possible grounds of accusation against Jesus. Such moral blindness that they stood self-condemned. Fascinating, isn't it? They failed to see the man's need and they condemned themselves. Jesus is watched on this day because the Pharisees, who are the religious elite, the pastors, the priests, are knowing that Jesus is not always kind of doing what he should be doing. They're accusing him of not abiding to the laws of Moses, the Old Testament laws and its commandments, especially around the Sabbath. I'm going to come on to that in a moment. And they're watching him for two reasons. One, to bring a legal case against him. If you're charged in court, they are looking for a charge. And secondly, to ruin his reputation. What's one of the 10 commandments? Obey the Sabbath. Keep the Sabbath day holy. And what's Jesus doing? Jesus is seemingly not doing that. The Jewish law was this: unless it was life-threatening, no work on the Sabbath. No cleaning, no cooking, no delivering food, no texting the boss, no just keep touching up the assignment, no no work on the Sabbath unless it was life-threatening. What is Jesus doing? Jesus is at work. Hence the question: what does the law say? And he throws it back, doesn't he? Like this verse 4. He throws it back. What does the law say? It's the last little paragraph on this first page. What does the law say? Should we do on the Sabbath? Should we do good? Or should we do what's evil? Should we save life? Or should we kill? And nobody answered him. It is fascinating because this is like a setup. This is Jesus knows that this is a setup. They know who Jesus is. They know how he works. And he is he's there. And as he heals this guy, he knows what the Pharisees are going to do and what they're going to say. Let's imagine for a moment what it would look like for us in our community, in our city, if our days and weeks could be shaped with the same level of faith and expectation in Jesus for a different reason, but that we expected Jesus to work. That we expected him to show up, that we expected him to heal, that we expected him to move. This half-time dread if you're a parent that you're facing. Imagine what it would look like if you said, God, I expect you to show up in that. The meeting with a colleague, the conversation about a dissertation with a lecturer, the conversation that you've got to have with a loved one. Imagine how it would change if you understood and expected that God was going to be present to heal, to restore, to love, to redeem. Imagine how that would change our lives. Regardless of what you face this week, let us have faith I mean the word like the Pharisees, who genuinely believe that Jesus is about to act. They're looking for a different reason to accuse. We're looking for life. But imagine what it could look like for us to see God at work, present, acting in ordinary, everyday places. Knowing the consequence of his actions, Jesus still advances. He still heads towards the man. He still heals this guy. Jesus is showing us again that healing this man, he has come to fulfill the law, to live a perfect life that we could not, to fulfill the 10 commandments rather than break them, to fulfill them. And as he's fulfilled them, and live this perfect life, he dies a death that belongs to us. He says, there's one way to God. There's one way to God, and it is through me. There's one way to fulfillment, and it is through me. There's one way to find life, and it is through me. What is Jesus doing in this moment? He is showing again his promise of the renewal of things. What Jesus promises that when he comes back at the end of time, and he comes back to judge the living and the dead, which we don't talk about because it's scary, that he's going to renew the earth, make it perfect once again, and there'll be no more suffering or tears or death. There'll be no more fear. That he'll stand and we'll be ushered into the perfect presence of a God who adores us and loves us and is for us. And regardless of where we've been and regardless of what we've done, he stands victorious. And he is showing us that he is the God who can save, who can love, who can restore. He's giving us a sign of what is to come. And yet, to go back to that quote, all they saw were possible grounds of accusations against Jesus. By such moral blindness, they stood self-condemned. Yet today's world is not too dissimilar, is it? Looking for every opportunity to discredit Jesus, to write off his teaching, to dive into what the Pharisees declare. The ethical decisions of the church, the political decisions of the church, the moral decisions of the church should be different and radically different from the world around us. Because like Jesus, we're not driven by emotions and feelings and desires and a self-motive to dictate our decisions and our steps, but rather we rely on something so much greater. We rely on Jesus doing that for us. We rely on God doing that for us. It's interesting, in John chapter 17, just I guess a few chapters on from this, Jesus says this. He says, my prayer is not that you would take them out of the world, but you protect them from evil, the evil one. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. Verse 17 in the NLT, another translation says this, make them holy by your truth and teach them your word, which is truth. Fascinating prayer. Let's dive into that. My prayer is that you don't take them out of the world. Don't remove them from the world, but you would protect them from evil. This is God's prayer. This is Jesus' prayer for us, that they're not of the world. In other words, when we become Christians, like we hand in our citizenship of the UK, of England, of Exeter, of London, and we say we are children of God, and therefore we are inheritors of his kingdom and citizens of heaven. We are in the world, but we don't belong to the world. And therefore make them holy, make them set apart for your truth. Teach them your word, which is truth. I think one of the greatest lies that the devil speaks over us, that we allow ourselves to be brought into each and every day, is cultural assimilation. The desire to fit in, the desire to find security and control and comfort in not standing out. Jesus doesn't allow us to opt into a life of fitting in, or to avoid conflict, or to have blind thinking of the people around us, however beautiful they may be. But he puts the relationship with us and God at a paramount. He says, this is the way I've called you to. Not the easy way, the hard way. The way where we'll be watched, judged. The way that people will see a difference. The way that you put me and God first will distinguish you and reveal something of the Father's heart to a hurting world around us. I want to just read the last bit of scripture and I want to break out into a discussion. This says this in verses 4 and 5. This is at the very bottom of this page. Then Jesus asked, what does the law say we should do on the Sabbath? Should we do good or should we do evil? Should we save a life or should we kill? And nobody answered. Just flip over the page for me, please. Jesus looked around at them in anger. He was upset because their hearts were stubborn. And then he said, stretch out your hand. And the hand became good as new. This is Jesus' plan. This is what Jesus wants to do. This is where Jesus wants to lead us. To have a faith that will put it on the line and say, Jesus, I trust you. I may not feel comfortable right now, but I trust you. And secondly, to see people healed and restored and come alive and find love and find out what they were truly made for. And so, I want to take a moment here. Unlimited, we break in the middle of our talks to have dialogue. We're not a monologue church, we are a dialogue church. I like the fact people tell me that I chat nonsense every week. And so, I want to have dialogue now. Can we just, in 2s and 3s where we're at, maybe 4s at most, can we just ask these questions? Can you share a recent moment where upholding a core Christian value and conviction brought you into direct conflict with a modern cultural norm, or you felt watched. Or perhaps you're not a Christian in this space. Perhaps you're new to faith. Love that about our community. If you're new to faith or church, what is one aspect of the Christian faith that clearly clashes with modern culture that you would encourage others to be more bold in practicing? Is that all right? Big questions, I know. We're going to break out and we're going to come back in 5 minutes' time. How was everyone's conversations? Interesting? More to pick up later? Yeah? Was it awkward or was it all right? It was good. Okay, cool. Never sure. I'm never sure. Okay, listen. I want to dive into this stubborn hearts conversation. Just dive into this first little bit of page 14. Jesus looked around at them in anger. He was upset because their hearts were stubborn. And he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand became good as new. Then the Pharisees went out and made plans with the Herodians, and they wanted to kill Jesus. Interesting. Jesus looked around and looked in anger because he was upset because their hearts were stubborn. Sorry, I got coffee the wrong way. One of the commentators said this: such hardness of heart angered him when he found it with his enemies, and grieved him and amazed him amongst his disciples. Where else do we find someone's heart being hardened in the scriptures? It's Pharaoh, isn't it? Yeah, Pharaoh, you know that story of Moses where Moses walks the people out of slavery and they go through the sea and the sea's parted and they walk through and the Egyptians charge after them and the wave comes and just takes out the Egyptians. Yeah, like the hardening of Pharaoh's heart leads to one of the great stories we find of the Exodus, the escape from slavery. There's a fascinating parallel between that story and the hardness of the Pharisees' heart that leads to the plot against Jesus, leading to his death, leading to the greatest story of our lives of freedom from slavery. What happens? God hears his people, right? And he acts. R. Alan Cole said this: hardening of hearts to us usually means callous or cruel, but to the Hebrew it meant stubborn resistance to the purpose of God. The very opposite of that humility and dual teachableness that God requires is a form of pride. And like unbelief, it is in part at least the attitude of the will. Hardness of heart. In the Hebrew, I learned a new word this week, means sinuous, which comes from the word sinewy, and it's like a stretched toughness. You know, like a muscle is built because you stretch it and you build it over time. You know, like it's built over being stretched and formed and worked out. It's fascinating. The comparison is incredible. Like, this is who God has called us to be, to have a heart which is stretched towards him rather than from him. Yeah, I find this fascinating, the hardness of heart. If we just jump on to the next slide, Oliver, thank you. The hardness of heart stretched away from God leads to death. But the hand stretched out towards God brings life. Yeah, in Jesus' day, the Greco-Roman society, they believed that the heart was the control center of our emotions and our intellect. And so the hardening of heart happened slowly over many repetitions, like a muscle being built with feelings and cultural wisdom from the world around us. And we find ourselves at a crossroads. How do we undo the stretching of our heart away from Jesus? What do we do when this happens? Well, like this guy, there is a simple answer to find our joy, to find our life, to find our fulfillment, to find our purpose, to find hope, to find life in abundance. It is simply stretching out our hand towards Jesus. We get to realign ourselves, to have healing spiritually. We get to go and play our part in the renewal of all things. Here is what we see Jesus doing in this passage time and time and time again. It's interesting, doesn't it? Like, We jump on a little bit. That people are fighting to spend time with Jesus. It says this: Jesus had healed so many people that those who were sick pushed and fought their way to touch him. This is the Missio Dei, the Latin Missio Dei, the work of God, the work that only God can do. This is God's work, his mission at work that we get to play a part in, the kingdom of God breaking out on earth. Something is happening spiritually in this place. I love this community. I love that we are seeing spiritual breakthrough time and time again. Last week, I got to speak at Synod, Church of England Council, like the governing body that kind of runs the Church of England locally. And I shared some stats. I want to just share them with you because I've been amazed what God's done in the last couple of weeks. In the last, this half term, so the last 5 weeks, through the coffee trailer, we've met and sold 767 coffees to young people in the park. 766, smiles, like prayers, conversations, interactions. And that's just the people who bought coffee from us. We've had 6 baptisms this term. We're not a church of 1,000 people, we're a church of 30, 40 people. 6 baptisms, we've got another 2, maybe another 5 to come this term. Just out of interest, just a show of hands, if this is the first church community you've been a part of, or you're new to church or back to church in maybe the last 6 months, can you just show a hand here? Look around. It's amazing. It's amazing what God is doing. There is something happening in this space where ordinary, regular people are wandering in and finding life, finding fulfillment, finding joy. They're finding what this man had. They come in as themselves and they leave different because they've had an interaction with a God who is for them, who they assume would be against them. For a God who loves them, who they assumed would kind of push them to one side. And I think the question that is being asked of us is, are we equipping ourselves to be the people that can usher in to our church, our community, a new season of spiritual revival? From everything I've seen, Jesus is building his church. What's his church? It's people gathered. It's not the 4 walls. This church building is impressive. It's been 1,000 years. But what's more impressive is that there have been people praying on this site for 1,200. The church is a group of people gathered to do life together, to glorify him, to love him, to become more like him, and to do the things that he is doing and has done throughout the millennia. People, forgive me if you weren't here last week, like a guy called Levi who we looked at last week. He used to be the equivalent of a mafia boss back in Jesus' day, who comes to know Jesus, calls his friends, calls his associates and say, hey, look, come see a new life that I am living. I used to do this, but now I'm following Jesus. People who are wanting and waiting to see the kingdom of God breaking through, that they would fast and pray to see spiritual breakthrough, who would wake up extra early to get on their knees to say, God, I want to see you at work today. People who would open their mouths, I'm going to say gobs, but open their mouths and say, hey, can I tell you about a man who changed my life? Because we are at war. We're at war. I find it interesting, this last little sentence on page 14 says this. When people who were controlled by evil spirits saw him, they fell down in front of him. The spirits shouted, you are the Son of God. But Jesus ordered them not to tell people about him. The unique claim of Jesus is that he is God and that there is no other God. That he is God. And the Greek gods don't stand, the Roman gods don't stand. But he is God. He is uniquely God. And we see the spiritual war that we find ourselves in. This healing is in part proof that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God, that he is who he says he is, and his mission is to renew all things. And there's a strong link in Mark, in this book, between the physical healings of Jesus and who we are as spiritual beings. What I'm not saying is that everyone who is ill has a demon, but what I am saying is that there is a spiritual force at work trying to undo the work of Jesus, provide false gods in our lives, to provide false ways of connecting with what we think is the divine, false ambitions, false hopes. And Jesus stands there saying, I am the one who will bring you life. I am the one who will rescue you. I am the one who will love you. I am the one who will take upon the debt, the spiritual debt that you have incurred upon myself, that you may live a free, whole, beautiful life. And what do we see here? When evil faces Jesus, it submits to him. There is no power compared to the power of Jesus. We are at war. There is a demonic force that wants to subtly take your life, to undermine Jesus, to tell you that you're not good enough, to say the pain, the doubt, the fear, the disunity that you see doesn't add up. But Jesus is here to show us life, to bring us joy, to bring us to the place that we could never bring ourselves back into a beautiful relationship with God, that we can be healed, restored, renewed, loved beyond measure. And so here is my short conclusion. The miracle of Jesus is not necessarily the healing of this guy's hand, but the relationship that he brings. The promise that it points to, that we get to play our part in God coming back to renew the earth, to make it perfect and beautiful once again. We get to see miracle after miracle. We get to witness our hearts and the hearts around us being softened to Jesus. But we are at war. We have to check ourselves for cultural assimilation, to question where we get our desires and our thoughts and our theology from, and to remember that everything we do, we were designed to praise and glorify God. That is who we are. And so, would you stand? We are going to pray together.